This evening, first up, more than 62,000 Guyanese have already received their cash grant, billions paid out so far, but thousands of applications are still incomplete. Tonight, what's causing the delay and when you can expect your money. Then a High Court ruling against GBTI after the bank closed accounts linked to a political party. The judge says the move was unlawful, but the bank is now pushing back. What this could mean for you and the wider banking system. Plus, floodwaters rising across multiple regions, farms underwater, communities affected, and emergency teams on the ground. Authorities warn the situation could worsen if the rain continues. Meanwhile, fail to report child abuse and you could face criminal charges. A strong warning tonight from the Human Services Minister as officials push for stricter accountability and protection for minors. And a major oil shipment arrives in Cuba, offering some relief after months of shortages. But with global tensions still high, is this just a temporary fix? Those stories and more coming up. Stay with us. Welcome to this broadcast of Channel 2's Headline News Update for March 31st, 2026. I'm Baby Bacchus. Thank you for joining us. First up, more than 62,000 Guyanese have already benefited from the government's $100,000 cash grant initiative, with over $6.2 billion processed as the nationwide distribution continues. Senior Minister within the Office of the President with responsibility for finance, Dr. Ashni Singh, provided the update on Monday, highlighting steady progress in the program's rollout, while noting that persons without bank accounts will still receive their cash grants. The first phase targeted public sector workers, including over 48,000 public servants, teachers, and members of the discipline service, who received salaries through the banking system. Their grants went directly into their bank accounts. The initiative has since been broadened through an online registration platform, allowing citizens to apply from home. Within 4 days of its launch, more than 26,000 persons successfully registered.
Beyond the initial 48,858 central government employees who received their cash grants in phase one, using the portal for self-registration, I'm pleased to announce that after 4 days of operation by the portal, we have seen 26,639 persons successfully complete their self-registration. That is to say, successfully complete all 3 stages of their self-registration.
Over 22,000 Guyanese citizens have begun the process, but have not yet completed it. Minister Singh is urging applicants to complete their registrations and remain patient amid high system traffic, noting that processing will continue in batches.
An additional 22,611 persons have started the self-registration process and are at various stages of completing their self-registration. And I want to urge all of them to complete the process, to log in once again, and to complete their self-registration. And if they encounter perhaps heavy traffic at the initial attempt, as I have previously indicated, I want to urge them perhaps to log in later at a time when the traffic might be a little bit slower, because we are seeing very heavy traffic volumes up to now.
So far, over 13,000 applications have been verified and processed under this phase, with some payments being credited within 24 hours. Combined with earlier disbursements, this brings the total number of beneficiaries to just over 62,000. The initiative is part of the government's effort to provide direct financial support to citizens. Dr. Singh said alternative arrangements will soon be introduced for those without bank accounts to ensure no one is left behind.
Everybody who meets the criteria will get their cash grant. So you need not worry if you haven't gotten through with the initial effort to self-register. You need not panic and you need not worry. You're going to get your cash grant. If you don't get through after the second or third attempt, there will be alternative solutions that will be available to you. If you don't have a bank account, we encourage you to open a bank account And if you choose not to open a bank account or not to use your bank account to receive this cash grant, you're still going to get your cash grant because a subsequent phase is going to be rolled out to address those people who don't have bank accounts. We remain, as always.
Moving on, the High Court has ruled that the Guyana Bank for Trade and Industry acted unlawfully when it closed the accounts of 4 members of the We Invest in Nationhood Win political party, finding that the bank breached its duty to act in good faith. In her ruling, Justice Nicole Pierce stated that the bank acted arbitrarily in terminating the accounts of Vanessa Bagot, Hirawati Mangaldeen, Natalia Angelia, and Abdul Ali, without conducting a sufficient inquiry or providing evidence linking their conduct to the termination. The court awarded each applicant $20,000 in damages and $300,000 in costs, noting that while GBTI had a legitimate interest in managing sanction-related risks, its actions did not meet the required standards of fairness, honesty, and rationality. The case stemmed from accounts closures affecting several WIN supporters following the party's involvement in the September 2025 elections and the sanctions imposed by U.S. authorities on party leader Azruddin Mohammed for alleged financial crimes. However, the court dismissed several other claims, including allegations of discrimination, breaches under anti-money laundering laws, and arguments related to procedural fairness, ruling that the matter was grouped in private contractual obligations. In response, GBTI stated that it will appeal certain aspects of the decision while maintaining that it acted in accordance with regulatory requirements and international compliance standards. The ruling is likely to shape future banking practices in Guyana as financial institutions balance regulatory compliance with their obligation to act fairly and in good faith, even as the matter heads to appeal. In other news, U.S. Ambassador to Guyana Nicole Terrio has rejected claims that the extradition requests involving businessman and opposition figure Azruddin Mohammed and his father Nizar Mohammed is politically motivated. The Mohammeds are currently before the courts in Guyana fighting a U.S. extradition request linked to an 11-count indictment alleging fraud, money laundering, and tax evasion. They have denied allegations and argued that the case is politically driven.
Certainly not politically motivated from our side, and it is our indictment, right? It's the U.S. government's indictment. The government of Guyana did not indict the Mohammeds, and I can assure you that there's nothing political about it from the U.S. side.
However, Ambassador Terrio said the United States pursues criminal cases only when there is strong evidence, insisting the matter is strictly legal and not political.
The United States does not pursue criminal charges for political reasons. We do it because we have hard, unequivocal evidence against a person. Why would we take on a case we don't think we're going to win? That's just a waste of the U.S. taxpayers' money. So we firmly believe that they're guilty of the crimes that they're being indicted for. It's in the Guyanese judiciary's hands at this point, and we're ready to move forward.
She said it is now up to the Guyanese courts to decide on the extradition, and the U.S. will wait for the process to be completed. The U.S. has already sanctioned the Mohammeds along with 8 Guyanese government officials since 2024. Even if the court rejects extradition, she said the sanctions will remain in place. The extradition request followed a U.S. grand jury indictment in 2025 and a formal submission to Guyana later that year. The case has since moved through the local courts, with the Mohammeds also pursuing appeals at the Caribbean Court of Justice. The ambassador added that the U.S. is prepared to proceed once the legal process concludes, while stressing that accountability is based on financial crimes and evidence, not. Stick around when we return. Flooding impacts multiple regions as authorities ramp up response efforts, and parents warn of criminal charges for failing to report child abuse and teenage pregnancy cases.
Good girl forget things. problem, Granny?
I want money for borrow for those surgery. I was dancing and I fall and fracture my hip.
If you need some quick money, you should check Lender's Jewelry and Pawn Shop.
Lender's Jewelry and Pawn Shop, Lot 238 South Road Border, Georgetown. Get jewelry made to order in just 72 hours. We also accept vehicles. Lender's, best rates, longest payback period.
Boys, I get through. Plus, I could dance again.
Lender's Jewelry and Pawn Shop.
Welcome back. Flooding has affected several areas across Guyana, following days of sustained rainfalls, prompting a coordinated national response as authorities continue to monitor conditions and assist impacted communities. The Civil Defense Commission said its Emergency Operations Center has been activated with field teams deployed nationwide to assess water levels, monitor affected areas, and support local authorities. An aerial assessment conducted in collaboration with the Ghana Defense Force and the National Drainage and Irrigation Authority revealed ongoing localized flooding in parts of regions 3, 4, and 5, particularly along sections of the East Coast, West Coast, and Ogle. While water levels in Georgetown have already receded, some low-lying areas continue to experience minor pooling. Authorities reported that agricultural lands in Mahaica, Maikoni, and Canal Polder have been significantly impacted, with crops affected by water accumulation. However, drainage systems remain operational and no structural issues have been identified at conservancy dams. Relief efforts are underway, with government distributing cleaning supplies and sanitation items to affected residents. Outreach has been led by officials including Priya Manikchand and Kiyomo Griffith, targeting communities in regions 3, 4, and 5. The CDC says it will continue working with regional and local authorities to identify vulnerable communities and deliver assistance, while urging residents to remain vigilant and report flooding as response efforts continue. In other news, the Minister of Human Services and Social Security, Dr. Vinay Prasad, is urging parents and the public to report all cases of child abuse and teenage pregnancy involving minors, warning that failure to do so could lead to criminal charges. She said anyone who is aware of abuse and does not report it may be considered complicit under the law and held accountable. Her comments came as she outlined how the Child Care and Protection Agency responds to such cases. According to Dr. Prasad, once a report is made, the CPA steps in to provide counseling and support for the affected child and family, while also working alongside the Ghana Police Force to investigate suspected abuse cases. She explained that evidence gathered is then forwarded to the Director of Public Prosecutions for possible legal action, especially in cases where perpetrators are identified. The Minister of Human Services also noted that forensic interviews are used to ensure child victims are not repeatedly re-traumatized during investigations. The minister reminded the public that the age of consent in Guyana is 16, meaning any sexual activities involving younger children is considered statutory rape. Dr. Prasad said government agencies are also strengthening referral systems and improving coordination to ensure cases are handled more efficiently, while expanding public education and outreach to encourage mandatory reporting and greater protection for. Don't go away after the break. Farmers warn of food shortages in Europe, and Asian markets stumble as the US-Israeli war on Iran fuels uncertainty.
Good girl forget things.
problem, Granny?
I want money for borrow for those surgery. I was dancing and I fall and fracture my hip.
If you need some quick money, you should check Lender's Jewelry and Pawn Shop.
Lender's Jewelry and Pawn Shop, lot 238 South Road Border, Georgetown. Get jewelry made to order in just 72 hours. We also accept vehicles. Lenders, best rates, longest payback period.
Boys, I get through. Plus, I could dance again.
Lender's Jewelry and Pawn Shop.
Welcome back. Now we take a look at what's happening in the region and around the world.
Good evening, I'm Dominic Gittins. Tonight, Suriname mourns former President Chandrika Prasad Santokhi, who has died at 67 after a sudden medical emergency. Cuba received its first oil shipment in months. Europe scrambles over rising fuel costs, and global investors turn cautious amid war-driven uncertainty. We begin in Suriname. Former Suriname President Chandrika Prasad Santokhi has died at age 67 after a medical emergency at his home. He was taken to the hospital on March 30th, where he was pronounced dead. President Jennifer Simpson paid tribute to his decades of public service. Santokhi, who led the country from 2020, was known for strengthening diplomatic ties and guiding economic reform efforts. A cause of death has not yet been disclosed. Cuba has been deeply dependent on oil supplies from Venezuela, but there's been a strict oil embargo since the U.S. operation in Venezuela. Now, a Russian tanker carrying 100,000 metric tons of crude oil has arrived in Cuba. It's the first shipment of oil to reach Havana since U.S. imposed blockade began in January. Al Jazeera's Lucia Newman reports.
After 3 months of acute blackouts, power, and petrol rationing, the news of relief from Russia is spreading like wildfire throughout Cuba.
Thank God, now maybe our transportation will flow again. Thank God.
But Russian fuel won't reach the pumps right away. Russian rather than Cuban authorities announced the arrival of the Anatoly Kolodkin, a tanker that's carrying 750,000 barrels of crude to the port of Matanzas here in Cuba. It's enough, according to experts, for 15 days of badly needed fuel. But it first needs to be refined, and that could take up to 20 days. Cuba has been under a fuel blockade since early January, with President Donald Trump threatening to punish any country that violated it.
Russia, of course, believes it is our duty not to stand aside and to provide the necessary assistance to our Cuban friends. We are pleased that the shipment of petroleum products has already arrived.
There'd been speculation of a confrontation if the U.S. used force to stop the tanker. But as it approached Cuba, President Donald Trump made a surprise announcement of his own.
If a country wants to send some oil into Cuba right now, I have no problem with it. If other countries want to do it, it doesn't bother me much. It's not going to have an impact. Cuba's finished. They have a bad regime.
It's uncertain whether this means that Trump will ease or end his campaign to choke off fuel to Cuba. But what he has made clear is that he hasn't changed his mind about taking over the island after he's finished with Iran.
For now, the next good news could be the arrival of the Seahorse, another smaller Russian tanker that's bringing diesel to Cuba. For a country that's struggling to live day to day without fuel, every little drop helps. Lucia Newman, Al Jazeera, Havana.
Rising fuel prices and concerns about food supply are prompting urgent talks across Europe, with G7 ministers meeting to contain the economic fallout and EU agriculture ministers also holding talks on how to mitigate the crisis for farmers who are facing skyrocketing fertilizer prices. Al Jazeera's Melina Veselinovic reports.
They're moving slowly, but that's by design. These buses are crawling through Paris in protest against rising fuel prices.
Every day, members are losing money just by driving, like the lorry drivers. The tourist coaches behind me, which 2 months ago signed contracts with their clients and told them it would cost a certain amount, today it doesn't cost that. It costs that plus 500 euros.
The chokehold on the Strait of Hormuz is not just affecting fuel. Important components for fertilizer, essential for crops, are also being held up. It's driving up costs for farmers, with some now questioning whether they can afford to plant all their fields. If they don't, food shortages could hit Europe by September. The warning has set off alarm bells, with G7 finance and energy ministers alongside central bank governors meeting virtually on Monday to assess the impact. In Brussels, EU agriculture ministers are also holding talks.
There is a growing unrest among our farmers because the prices of fertilizers and also the prices of energy is growing now very rapidly.
Solutions may take time. For now, unless fertilizer starts moving soon, the strain on food production is likely to show up on supermarket shelves before long. Milena Veselinovic, Al Jazeera.
Investors are shifting from risks to what one analyst described as weeks of misplaced optimism amid deep uncertainty over the war. Governments are scrambling to cushion the blow from surging energy prices. Al Jazeera's Patrick Fook reports.
President Donald Trump may be upbeat about diplomatic efforts to end the war in Iran, but attacks by Yemen's Ansarallah group, also known as the Houthis, over the weekend could signal an expansion of the conflict. The MSCI Asia-Pacific Index fell to its lowest level since the start of the year on concern about higher energy prices weighing on economic growth. South Korea's Kospi and Japan's Nikkei 225 led losses in the region, both falling by about 3%. Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index shed roughly 0.8%, while Australia's S&P ASX 200 lost 0.6%. China's Shanghai Composite bucked the trend, adding around 0.25%. Analysts say China is relatively protected from energy supply disruptions thanks to its own energy infrastructure. Meanwhile, governments across the region are implementing measures to cushion the impact of significantly higher oil prices on households and businesses. Australia's government said it would cut the tax on fuel and diesel by 50% for 3 months to ease price pressures.
Australia's fuel supply outlook remains secure in the near term. We need to be very clear as well with Australians that the longer this war goes on, the worse the impacts will be.
In a positive sign for energy markets, Thailand, Pakistan and Malaysia have secured clearance from Iran for some of their vessels to transit the Strait of Hormuz. But traffic through the waterway remains heavily restricted. Separately, Pakistan said after a meeting with regional foreign ministers that it's preparing talks to bring an early end to the war.
I briefed the visiting brother foreign ministers on the prospects of potential US-Iran talks in Islamabad. The visiting foreign ministers expressed their fullest support to this initiative.
Markets remain gripped by the uncertainty. President Trump also hinted the US could seize Iran's oil export hub on Karg Island and suggested that the broader objective of the war is to take control of the country's oil, stoking fear among investors that the crisis and the disruption to energy markets could be drawn out much longer. Patrick Fogg, Al Jazeera, Singapore.
Thanks, Dominique. This brings us to the end of our regional and global news coverage. Up next is the 3-day weather forecast. And that's it to V3 Headline News for this Tuesday evening. As we take our leave, we invite you to follow us on Facebook and YouTube. You can tune in tomorrow 6:30 a.m. for rebroadcast and at 7 p.m. for more news. Until then, please take care of yourselves and each other.